your goal is here and that's your first pull-up, but like there's nothing between here and here. If your goal is to bench press 400 pounds, you wouldn't go, well, I'm at 200, like I'll just try 400 until I get it, right? You have to create these incremental steps. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the ELITEFTS YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be about trying to get your first pull-up, or pull-up regressions that you can use to get you to that point, right? Because obviously if you can't do one, how do you train it to get stronger than them? Dave asked us to do this one and I was pretty surprised we didn't already have one. So apologies for that if you needed it before now. And I want to show you what I think is the best way to do it. And obviously there's a lot of different opinions here and there's never one best way to do anything. But first thing I want to look at is doing pull-up like eccentric only, right? So like people will have you jump to the top and only lower yourself down. So obviously just for demonstration purposes, in case you're a bit lost at that, you set up a box or something like this, basically hop up to the top. And then the goal would be to lower yourself down under control. And that would be like the extent of your pull-up training to start with. Now, in theory, like there's nothing wrong with that because there's plenty of good evidence now on the benefits of eccentric training for strength and things like that. The problem is that when we're doing these studies on eccentric training, we're not using it on movements where the individual being tested has no ability to do the concentric portion of the lift yet. Like let's say we're doing eccentric overloading on a back squat. Well, that athlete already knows how to back squat. They already know how to perform the concentric phase, right? But that's not true here because you've never done a pull-up. So the problem that we have here is that eccentric phase, or that eccentric training, might get you stronger, but it doesn't actually teach you how to perform the concentric part of the pull-ups. You can have all the strength that you want, but you don't really learn to engage in that phase of the lift. So there tends to be a big disconnect is what I'm saying, right? So you can absolutely do like negative only reps. Be warned that they'll probably make you very sore, but you need to practice the concentric phase to some degree. Now, you can get this from lat pull downs to some degree. Now, we did a decent video, I think, on lat pull downs a while ago, which again, Noah will do his thing. And we want to make sure that we're doing them in a way that mimics what we're doing in a pull-up if we want them to carry over to it. Now, I'm working off the presumption here that we're doing a pull-up for the specific benefits of a pull-up, which primarily is going to be like lat recruitment and really ab strength or core strength, right? We can absolutely do them in like a big upper back dominant, like chest to bar type variation. That's not what I'm talking about, at least in this context. Right? I'm talking about a pull-up and a lat pull-down done in a lat dominant manner where we want to try and keep the ribs kind of down. The elbows are going to be more forward and we're going to try and put more of the workload into the lats, right? So first off, it's going to be when you're doing your lat pull-downs, are you doing them in a manner that actually mimics the recruitment and strengthens the lats? Or are you doing them in kind of like a very upper back dominant posture because then they're not really going to have the carryover that you want, right? So that's number one. Do your lat pull downs, but do them the right way. Now, the main thing, the lat pull downs, of course, aren't going to train this segment, right? The core musculature that you need to really hold in place. Now, what I would probably go towards for that would be doing something like a tall kneeling straight arm pull down. So, tall kneeling posture, cable machine pulling down from there. But then if you are doing your eccentric only reps, there's going to be a big difference in core activation, whatever you want to call it, between doing them with your back arched and your feet back and behind you and doing them in that like kind of banana posture that we spoke about. And again, Noah can put that video up too, I guess. So we're going to be here, lock the legs, point the toes up, have the feet slightly in front of the body, jump up, try and hold that banana position there, keep the core rigid. And then as you do your eccentric only rep, try and maintain that, okay? As opposed to letting the feet kick back and we go into extension, that really kind of takes all that workload out of it. So if you are doing eccentric only, are you doing them in a manner, again, that carries over? Let's assume you are. So now we want to start working on just doing an actual pull-up, okay? So in my opinion, I think this is the absolute best way to set up getting your first concentric pull-up. Okay, now, I know I shouldn't say this because we sell them, but I'm not a huge fan of like the assisted pull-up machines because I just find they're too slow. And what I mean by that is like, you pull, you go up a bit, and then they kind of catch you up and you get this kind of disjointed assistance as you go through it. Whereas with the bands, I tend to find it's much smoother, and also it helps us more in the most challenging part, which is both a good and a bad thing, right? Because We still need to get stronger in that challenging part, but it gives us an easier transition, right, into that pull-up. So what I've set up here is just a band on the J-hooks and a rack like this, okay? So now why is this better than setting up there, okay? Now the reason, in my opinion, this is better. If I put a band up here, right, and then I put my leg through it, that band stretches a huge distance, right? Now bands are having like an almost exponential curve in terms of how much assistance they gave till they snap and then you get zero, right? So when that band is tied there, and maybe, you know, I think my foot is about here when I step off the box, right? The difference in assistance that you'll get through that range of motion on the pull-up is enormous. So there'll be way less assistance at the top, way more at the bottom. So it tends to get too easy at the bottom and maybe even too hard at the top when you set it up in that way. Whereas when we set it up higher here and we're dealing with lower amounts of actual stretch in the band, that exponential curve isn't so steep. So let's say it depresses down to here. The difference in help between here and say here is much smaller. So I'm still getting some, and I'm not getting this huge amount of help at the bottom, right? So let's just see what that looks like. Now, the other thing that I like about having the band set up in front like this is it encourages that kind of banana shaped posture again, right? So to do this, what we do is just step in one at a time. And again, aim for that same posture. So the knee is going to be locked, toes are going to be pointed up, hips are going to be flexed, so they're slightly in front of the body. Go down to your dead hang, right? And then keep that posture, then almost kind of push into the band as you do your pull-up. So now in this top position, I'm getting like almost nothing, right? And a reasonable amount at the bottom. But what I've also now done here is set up a progression system, right? I have these J hooks set on, I think it's 17, right? So let's say I got to the point now where that was getting pretty manageable and wanted to make it harder. All I would have to do now would be to drop this down. So we're going to put these down. Oh, sorry, that was on 15. So now we're going to go down to 17. And what I'm going to do now, by lowering the band, but keeping the rest of the setup the same, I'm going to get just a little bit less help. So now it's probably going to completely unload at the top and be slightly less stretched at the bottom. So now when I'm here, now when I get to the top here, I have basically nothing here at all and very slightly less there at the bottom, okay? So now I've created a progression system, right, where I can start the band at a certain height. I can keep the same band the whole time. And then, because this is the other problem with setting them up here, right? It's like, well, I've got like an orange band and now that's easy. I go to like the next band down, ends up being quite a big increase in difficulty, right? Whereas here, I can incrementally creep this down and get just a little bit less help, as well as having, should we say, a more even amount of help throughout it. So this would be my preference, right? How we'd set this up, and set it up as high as you need to, but you know, in most scenarios you want it so that you're getting unloaded to a reasonable degree at the bottom and keeping a little bit of help at the top, at least to start, right? Now, how else can we play with this? Now, let's say we don't have access to bands, or like we've only got a couple of bands and maybe they don't give us enough help, right? Well, then we start playing around with the grip, because the grip is another way we can modulate the difficulty, right? So when we're doing, I know in my definition, a pull-up is going to be a pronated grip, right? But really it doesn't matter, but we can play with that. So let's say you're someone who hasn't got their first pull-up yet, and let's say you're very far away from it. So even with like a reasonable amount of band tension here, it's just still not enough. Well, then we can play around with the grip position. And if we go supinated, and if we go closer together, that's going to be easier. And obviously then we can navigate out. We can go wider. That'll make it more difficult. So we can create this progression system where even within this same height here, I could make it easier or harder depending on the grip I use. So let's say this is my new setup. I haven't done this before and I know I'm quite weak here. Well, I might start with a really narrow supinated chin up like this, put way more of the workload on my biceps, right? And then I'll stick with this type, right? Until I hit the desired level of strength that I want to hit. And then instead of creeping this band down, let's say I don't have the option to do that, then instead I could navigate to either a slightly wider supinated grip, or I could go out to a neutral grip, which will be slightly harder again. And then last but certainly not least, then I could go to like a shoulder width pronated grip, like here, tuck the elbows in and forward, and that is going to be harder yet again. And then it might be the case of, cool, I can do that. Now I can do a couple of reps pronated grip. I've done that progression. Now maybe I move to a lesser band, because let's say, for example, I didn't have fancy adjustable J hooks, like the band kind of has to be here for whatever reason, right? But I might have a thinner band. So now I need to make more progression before I drop to that thinner band, because if I just go from being able to do a couple of close supinated with this to the thin one, I'm screwed, right? So I get to the point where I can do, say, 4 to 6 pronated grip ones, and I go, cool, I'm going to take off the orange band now, put on that thin band, which whatever color that's going to be, and then I would go back to that close supinated grip, and I could do that exact same progression. Or if you do have a rack like this, do the progression with your grip, drop it down a slot, go back through it. So there's a couple of different ways that you can create an incremental progression system, because that's where people really go wrong. I think, not to sound too critical with these things, is that your goal is here and that's your first pull-up, but like there's nothing between here and here. Whereas what we need to do is create some kind of tiered progression. You know, if your goal is to bench press 400 pounds, you wouldn't go, well, I'm at 200, like I'll just try 400 until I get it, right? You have to create these incremental steps. And I think this kind of band setup here is going to be the easiest way that you can do that and create some kind of easily incremented progression system to get your first chin up. If setting up your band like this is the only option you have, you can still introduce a progression system to it. Now, we already talked about the grip, so we got that, that's cool. We can even layer in then how we use the band. So the most amount of help you're going to get from the band is when you put both feet in. So you put both feet in, stretch it out maximally, right? Then if we wanted to say, let's say that got semi-easy, right? What we would do then is only put one foot in the band. It won't stretch the band quite as much. Now it's a reasonably small difference, but it all counts at this point, right? And let's say then we progress to the point where now that's a bit too easy. Well, then what we do instead is put both of our knees into the band. So now loop it around both your knees. And obviously when you're at the bottom of your pull-up, if it's in your knees, let's say the band is stretched to here, whereas if your legs were out straight, it might be down there. So now you're getting less help from the band. Again, that will be obviously a bigger difference than swapping from 2 feet to 1 foot, whatever, right? And then you can do the same thing then. So you've done 2 knees, that's gotten quite easy. Now you just go, so you only put 1 knee in. Again, that'll stretch the band very slightly less. You get a little bit less help, right? So now you have 4 different variations that you can do with this band. And let's say your next band is, at the start, is probably not going to be enough help for you to do anything, right? So you go through these 4 progressions. And then when you can do a reasonable amount of pull-ups with just the 1 knee in this band, you can probably go to the next band, which is smaller, put both feet inside that and can stretch that out considerably more, and you'll probably be good to go. You might even find that the next band down from this, when you do have both your feet in it and your legs are straight, actually gives you more help than when you've only got 1 knee in here. So that crossover is actually helpful, right? And then you can go through that same progression system there with that band. And again, it just helps you create this incremental process where you're not trying to make too big of a jump and just getting stuck. So between the knee and the feet positions and the grip, you've got like multiple ways that you can create a progression system there, even if you are stuck with this. But if you're not stuck with this and you have the J hooks, my preferred option would be to incrementally drop down the height there so that you can do it in a slower, more calculated way. So hopefully that's helpful. If you want any more information about how to actually execute the chin-ups, then again, Noah's going to link up that video that we did about dips and chin-ups, whenever it was, that's going to teach you more about like how you should be performing them. But this specifically is about the progression system you can use to get that. Hopefully that was helpful, and we'll see you next time.